Yes. Wow.
It's so satisfying right here, right here.
Wow.
That's a legit
so
like
dope to
heavy
hear
metal
that.
solo right
Oh
there.
my God. This is
could
so
be it.
special. The stems, Rapture. Oh, this is special.
Such a joy.
Don't cry.
Oh, okay, I won't.
I hear you choking up. Luxury, today we're talking about a song that blends new wave, post-punk, disco, and a little newcomer named rap to create a sound emblematic of the downtown New York music scene of the early 1980s.
That's right, Diallo. And in fact, it's the first song to feature rapping to top the Billboard charts.
That's right. And we're back with the man who told us everybody's fly. We're talking one song, and that song is Rapture by Blondie with our special guest, Fab Freddy. I'm actor, writer, director, and sometimes DJ Diallo Riddle.
And I'm producer, DJ, songwriter, and musicologist Luxury, aka the guy who whispers, interpolation.
And this is One Song.
The show where we break down the stems and stories behind iconic songs across genres and tell you why they deserve one more listen.
You will hear these songs like you've never heard them before, and you can watch One Song on YouTube and Spotify. While you're there, please like and subscribe.
And if you're looking for even more music facts, more conversations, and more us, these two guys, we've got a Patreon now. Go to patreon.com/Diallo Luxury. That's patreon.com, DILLOLUXXURY. In other words, our names.
Do all that spelling. As we mentioned, we have a very special guest with us here today, a pioneer in graffiti who brought that art form and many others to the mainstream, the co-producer and soundtrack co-creator and star of seminal hip-hop film Wild Style, the first host of Yo MTV Raps, and now author with his memoir, Everybody's Fly. It's out now. You have to buy, you have to read it. Oh my gosh. Please welcome Fab Freddy in the building.
Hey. Thank you for having me. Honored to be here.
Before we get to the stems luxury, you have an early version, none of us know this existed. You have an early version of the song that we found. Tell us more about it.
Well, apparently the earliest version of Rapture was recorded slower, at a slower tempo. And while we don't have the demo...
Like a Christmas theme or something like that?
Oh God, that was...
Well, so here's what happened to it. It was originally just recorded slower, and then they decided to speed it up, but then Chris Stein went back to get the early version in order to make, with this gentleman right here, what we're about to hear. Friends, this is Yuletide Throwdown, based on an earlier, slower version of Rapture and featuring Fab Freddy.
Here we go.
Oh boy.
Christmas rapping to the break of dawn, cause it's just about that time of year, but this is Christmas time.
Have no fear.
We be shocking the house and then rocking it well.
I mean, this blew our minds. I think we both said we had never heard of
I'd never heard that before.
We started looking at
That
this
came out
song.
on a flexi disc in England in 1982, so it was
Correct.
released.
So there was this popular magazine, I think it was called Flexi Pop,
That's the one.
that would feature a flexible
You get a free record. It would come with
in the magazine.
Yeah,
It was bound in the magazine. It was flimsy
You had to
little
take it out.
colored thing where you'd
Yeah.
pull it out. I think it was a way you could tear and rip it out, and you'd have a soft, flexible record that really played. And Chris was like, "Yes, magazine is really popular." But so it was one of those things when I wish I would have put a little more effort into what I did, because it was just this flexi thing, a Christmas thing, but for Flexi Pop, a Christmas thing that they reissued several years ago, and now
it's in the world forever.
It's in the world forever.
I think it's so dope.
And
so dope.
Who could have known that slowing it down, then going to double time on the at the end of the chorus? Like I think it's super dope.
But also, what blows me away is we didn't do the lyrics together. So it's funny how I laid my lyrics down, and then Debbie comes and like kind of references what I said and adds in.
Oh, you didn't record that at the same time.
Like Santa
Oh, that's
Claus.
amazing.
No.
Yeah, it was only the sunglasses that apparently made him not look like Santa Claus.
Yeah.
I love this recording, and I like the fact that she went in after you. It's like when you hear about like T.I. recording something and Ludacris hears it and he goes in and records it after.
Yes. No, not like that. So, but it's amazing that people love it, and it pops up every holiday season. And people hit me up on, like, hey, yo, I'm listening. I go, oh my God. And they send me images of the cover.
Throwdown. Why
Yeah.
Throwdown? Why wait till Christmas to throw down?
That's a good question, too. That's another one. That's one of those big surprises that happen in life.
Well, we love it. LUXXURY, what can you tell us about the recording of, let's say, the canonized version of Rapture?
Let's talk about Rapture and how it got made, and then we're going to break down the stems with the gentleman in the room who's going to talk about this. What was happening behind the scenes with these people? It's really great to have you here for this. So the recording of Auto American, this is Blondie's 5th studio record. Interestingly, 2 things. First of all, it was originally called Coca-Cola, but they had to change the title because they were worried about, being sued. Cease and desist. But the other thing I didn't realize until we were getting into the episode, it's recorded in Los Angeles.
Yes.
Rapture, this seminal New York hip-hop moment, everything we've been talking about is recorded in Los Angeles.
It was.
It was recorded at United Western Studio on 6000 Sunset Boulevard, right over here, now Ocean Way Studio. And it's produced by Mike Chapman, who we're going to talk a little bit about. Unsung hero of the episode. Did you meet Mike? Do you have any Mike Chapman stories?
Did meet Mike once or twice back then. And I just remember Chris raved about him. He was new. The previous guy, I can't remember his name. That worked with
Richard Gottaher.
Okay,
I don't know
on E to the Beat and the other records, but they were very pleased. And they were looking for people to improve the sound. They wanted to step up the quality of the sound. I remember Chris and them telling me they wanted to do music that more people could dance to.
Oh, wow.
And then he goes off and makes his record.
He joins the crew actually for their 3rd record, which is the record where they pop up. Parallel Lines is the 3rd record. And just a little bit more about Mike Chapman. Australian gentleman who meets Nicky Chin. We were just talking about Chapman and Chin. In the 70s, they kind of rule the charts with the glam rock movement. They have 19 top 40 hits with The Sweet, Susie Quattro, Mud, all these early 70s like massive hit records are coming out of the collective efforts of Chapman and Chin. And then famously, they do a song with this unknown band or lesser known band called Racy, which turns into a cover by Tony Basil called Mickey.
Wow.
And that recently is another 3rd generation hit as Apatow with Bruno Mars and Rose. So that's all Mike Chapman. And that brings him into the Blondies world. And he produces Parallel Lines, E to the Beat, their 4th record. And that's where they have their hits. This is Heart of Glass era. It's One Way or Another. It's Hanging on the Telephone.
Oh, boy.
And that brings us to where we are today in 1980 to record Auto American in Los Angeles, of all places.
Amazing.
All right, let's get into the stems. LUXXURY, let's start with the drums.
Let's start with Clem, born Clement Anthony Burke. Born Clement Anthony Bozuski. Changed his name to Clem Burke. Incredible drummer.
Good job, Clem.
Let's listen, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we're hearing in this beat. So he's just laying it down. It's 4 to the floor. But what happens here, there's 2 things. First of all, note this motif. It's just a crash on the 1 and the 3. He does that along with the lyrics to kind of emphasize several times in the song what's being sung in what we're going to refer to as like the pre-chorus or the bridge section. So that's a motif that becomes kind of a hook, kind of like a riff that you like. You don't hum it because it's not a melody, but it's memorable and it's very iconic to the song. But the other one I want to point out is this one in the hi-hats. And this is really important, where he starts dropping 16th notes. I'll play it and then we'll talk about it. Right there. If you think about it, that's very similar to the rapping cadence.
Fab Freddy told me everybody's fly. DJ spinning, I said, my, flashes.
Once Blondie comes in, once Debbie comes in and starts rapping, a lot of the same kind of similar dropping of a 16th note starts to happen, mapping to that.
Wow.
And Clem, I was looking into like what he might have been inspired by. He said he was influenced by David Bowie's Station to Station album. And as soon as I saw that quote, I think I knew exactly what it was. Check this out. This is Dennis Davis drumming on David Bowie's
Dennis Davis.
Golden Years from 1975. See if you hear a connection in how the hi-hats are being played. So he's playing 16th notes, but there's an emphasis.
Damn, that's funky right there.
It makes it almost more breakbeaty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that dropped 16th note that is another motif and becomes kind of a distinctive pattern. Because everything else he's doing is a disco beat. It's just 4 to the floor and the kick and the snare. So this is where he throws a little sauce in there, a little Clem Burke sauce.
Clem Burke.
Yeah. And then I'll just play for you one more of these crash motifs, and I'll throw in the vocals so you can kind of hear what he's doing. You can hear the drums and the vocals kind of have this rapport.
Yes.
They're kind of communicating with each other.
Yes.
A rapport.
If you will. A rapturous rapport.
Let's move on to the bass. What's going on with the bass in this song?
All right, well, this is Nigel Harrison on bass, British member of Blondie. Were you friends with Nigel?
I knew all the band members at that time. I wasn't friendly with them, but Clem Burke, Nigel Harrison, Jimmy Destry. These guys were good. That was Blondie.
Man, I'm so... Again, the FOMO is just going to be like all over the room today.
Chris Stein.
Well, let's listen to, basically he's playing a 2-bar loop the entire time, except for this pre or bridge section. So we'll play you the loop. Keep in mind, it's a 6.5-minute song. So he's laying this down in a pre-looping era.
Wow.
Or at least they didn't, for this record, to my understanding, loop it. He's just performing this sick bass line the whole time. Let's listen. There's something about it that's so perfect. It's 2 bars. I have done my whole musical career. I've been looking for the perfect loop. I just love it when there's 2 bars that is just infinitely gratifying like that. And I think what's happening is a little bit, there's a question mark on the first half. Dun, 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 because that lands on the minor third. And then the second half is the response because the dun, 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 and you're back to the root.
Yeah.
And then you're ready for the question and then the answer and the question and the answer. So it's this really gorgeous 2-bar cycle for the entire time.
Wow.
It has that same sort of I'm walking cadence that so many of the classic era disco songs have. I think that's part of what makes them remind all of us of New York and just walking. I mean, that opening scene in Saturday Night Fever. Yeah. He's walking. It's just, it feels like walking music.
Yeah,
I don't know.
The cadence of a brusque New York Manhattan.
Very true. I can see that. As you say it, I see them walking now.
You see them walking. You see the trash cans not getting picked up. You see the graffiti on the walls.
Yes.
Well, let's move on to the guitar. And there's so much here we want to unpack.
So there's definitely 3 at least guitar parts in the song. And I'm pretty sure it's Chris Stein and Frank Infanti, the 2 guitar players. But I think Mike Chapman, the producer, also might be playing a role. Let's listen and break it down, and I'll tell you why I think that. So here's one of the at least 3 guitar parts, the whole note chords that the song begins with. And it sounds like a keyboard, but I
thought that was
it's
a totally different instrument.
It might be 2 guitars actually harmonized. I'm not exactly sure, but it's gorgeous. Okay, so it should be said at this point, as wonderful as that is, there is a quote from Mike Chapman, producer Mike Chapman, who said that that the band Blondie were, quote, musically the worst band I ever worked with. So I'm not trying to throw shade here, but it must be said that part of why we think Mike Chapman is playing a role in the song, first of all, he said that they were, quote, the Blondies were tough in the studio, real tough. None of them liked each other except Chris and Debbie. And there was so much animosity. They didn't give a fuck about anything. They just wanted to have fun, didn't want to work too hard getting it.
Whoa.
The only great musician among them was Frankie Infanti, the guitar player, the 3rd guitar player in this song. We're about to hear his part. He's an amazing guitarist. The rest of them are all over the bloody place.
in defense of Blondie, never thought I'd have to say that, but in defense of Blondie, in the CBGB Max's Kansas City days, I feel like that was part of the punk aesthetic, was that you weren't supposed to be too good at these instruments, right?
I mean, I wonder how much in retrospect we kind of ascribe to that. I think they were trying.
No. I think there's effort. And by the way, they have the track record.
Yeah.
Back when I thought I wanted to be in a band, I was like, I'd like to be in a band with Blondie. I literally thought about Blondie because I thought that their eclectic nature, from Tide is High to Heart of Glass to Rapture to, Call Me one way or another. Like I was like, they do so many different types of music.
They're
Like,
incredible songwriters. I'm sure to see them live, I'd kill to go back and see them at CBGB in 75, 76. But it's funny when you read these Mike Chapman quotes. These are all from interviews on Sound magazine. And then you go back and read some of what Blondie says about him. It's like,
Whoa.
what did they say about him?
well, Debbie says, quote, Mike is a real hot chili pepper. Energetic and enthusiastic. He would strive for the technically impeccable take. So we would do take after take. And when you read that in a magazine, it's just sort of black and white words.
Yeah.
But when you get kind of the like Mike Chapman, what he's been saying about them.
Sounds like he's a perfectionist,
Yes.
and they're the opposite of that. And I like some grimy DIY.
Yes.
It ain't perfect, but let's go home. I like some of that.
But they
I
work
like
together.
some of that as well.
But they worked together on these hit records over and over again. So clearly that dynamic worked. Blondie understood that they needed a little bit of that crack in the whip in the studio.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think you were in a group called Gray ever so briefly.
Very
with Jean-Michel Basquiat.
Yeah.
And who was the
Michael
third
Holman.
member?
There was Michael Holman. There was several other
From the
members.
Canal Zone days. Pick up
Correct.
the book. This will all make sense. But
Yes,
this is
yes.
artists being artists and sometimes not being the best musicians on their instrument, but
Correct.
trying out ideas.
A big part of the punk thing was like you didn't need to know how to play your instrument. And that was some of the things when I'd read some of these bands saying that made me think I could have a conversation with these people about graffiti as art and this new kind of rap music, rapping over the beats.
I think so much.
So
I mean, there's the fact that DJs were touching the vinyl. You weren't supposed to touch
you
vinyl.
were not supposed to
That's
put your
funk in
fingers
itself.
anywhere near the vinyl.
Your mom or your dad would
And
be real mad.
nah, people, you would get seriously disciplined for that. But that was a big innovation that I think Flash helped with. Need to really put your hands on a record. And it's interesting though, because in early hip hop and at early hip hop parties, the feel that those records had, it was a different energy. It added sort of a patina to the music. And when hip hop began to really get refined, the idea of sampling and Molly Marr and those guys, hearing what would be referred to as the popcorn on the records was like a key ingredient, because when Sugar Hill put out its first records, they would just have bands play note for note what was the popular thing that the DJs were playing. And it would be a little too clean. It didn't have that grit, that grime. And people like the Bomb Squad later and Molly Marr initially knew that was an ingredient.
DJ Premier. I mean, like, I feel like he leaves the dirt on the record.
That is a connection too to the punk rock thing, because you want to have the aesthetic of the music, the authenticity of it is baked into how it is recorded. And ideally, it's not recorded super well. It's not pristine and hi-fi. You want to hear the chops. You want to hear the mistakes, the flubs, the not every note's being hit. That's endemic. It's part of both hip-hop and punk rock. They both share that.
That's true. And also in hip-hop's pursuit, particularly in the 90s, of those original records that were sampled, also what they studied and learned about were the recording techniques, as opposed to a mic on every single instrument, multiple mics on the drums.
They weren't making a Steely Dan record. They were trying to go for something more
correct.
Grit.
But the way I understand a lot of those 60s soul records, it'd be one or two mics.
In the room, for the whole band.
And so when people are like, how do we get this? How do we recreate? Like when the Dap King. I read that they were learning.
Sharon
and
Jones.
There began a pursuit of the early mics and amps with
They bought
tubes.
all that same gear that was used
all
in
the
the
gear
day.
that was used to really
it's like a
get
Jack White thing to do. Too.
yes.
Yeah, this is what Mark
White
Ronson
thing.
and the Dap Kings all did for the Amy Winehouse record.
Correct.
To capture that 60s authentic feel, because the authenticity is in the songwriting, it's in the vocal, but it's also in the recording. All of those kind of signifiers equal, this is real, this is authentic.
Yes.
I
And
love
that
that.
and to get the quality of so much of that great music that we loved, which hip hop particularly wanted to sample and extend. It was people began to understand how that process went down, which I think was fascinating, which definitely connects to the punk aesthetic. Because punk essentially was rebelling against the way established rock had gotten
Prog rock and the
it was all about itself, and they were getting too slick and too many microphones in the studio on the drums and all that stuff. Like let's
7-minute rock songs.
You know,
it was like
too many
Punk
long
was like-
solos.
Yeah.
So they dialed back on a lot of that. And I think that was Blondie was blending in a bit of that. Hence the confrontations with Chapman not getting that is apparently.
And the irony of that is that in this punk rock, hip hop, disco song, which we're in the middle of, which is inventing this blend in real time, we do have this crazy wailing guitar solo by Frank and Fancy.
Yes.
Let's listen to it. You almost forget that it's there until you're listening.
Yes,
and you're like, is this a Van Halen song? What's going on here?
Oh, shit.
Frank and Fancy, according to Mike Chapman, the most talented member musically speaking.
He's guitars.
Yes.
It's so satisfying right here.
Wow.
That's a legit
so dope.
heavy metal solo right
Oh,
there.
my God. This is so special. The stems, Rapture. Oh, this is special.
Such a joy.
Don't cry.
Oh, okay, I won't.
I hear you choking up.
Listen, let's double back for a second to talk about how that second section that I've alluded to a few times. The song is a groove, but it's broken up by this moment where it goes to this other place, right? Where the crash goes, where we just heard the second half of that solo. I've been calling it the bridge or the pre-chorus. What's happening that's interesting, it kind of harkens back to 2 previous episodes of the show. We have a Phrygian moment, go back to our Nas episode, with a flat 2, and I'll play that for you now, and I'll explain what that means. Here are the chords, and I'll walk you through what you're hearing. So the song is in E minor, and then when we get to the stepping lightly, that part, we go to a flat 2. This is our Phrygian moment. It's strange. It'll be even stranger when we get to the vocals. So that's a clever little part they added to break up just the groove. We go up a half step, and that's why in that moment it goes, it's a little bit like, whoa. It's a little interesting and unusual sounding.
It's funny, when you just play those 2 parts together, I feel like I'm on a Hawaiian vacation. Like, you really need the rest of the rhythm section to make it feel like a dirty disco song.
Just those chords on their own it's a half step up from E minor to the F. So it's a flat second, and that's our Phrygian moment. Again, go back to our Nas episode for a deeper dive into what that means. But that's part of what's happening in this song to kind of give it a little more flavor in that moment.
I want to hear the tubular bells. I think that I really enjoy the bells on this.
Okay, just a heads up. In this part of the stems, there's a bunch of stuff that's baked together. So we're going to hear Jimmy Destry literally playing actual tubular bells that were in the studio. But you're going to hear it mixed together with some percussion and as we go along, some guitar and some other things. So here are the tubular bells.
Wow.
These are stand-up bells, like giant bells, like in an orchestra.
Such a big part of the record.
So that's, I believe, Jimmy Destry's only contribution to this song.
But what a great contribution.
Yeah.
When we were going back and listening
Such
to
a great sound.
when we were listening to this week, I was reminded of like Always Something There to Remind Me, which is an 80s classic. Like there's something about like those strong bells. Those tubular bells.
Yes, I love hearing that, like just isolated like that. That's a key part of the record.
It's so clean.
Very key. Very clean.
And I never
Christmassy.
Yeah, Christmassy, you're right. Maybe that's where the Yuletide idea came from.
Yes.
Yeah. To do the Yuletide
Absolutely.
throwdown.
Yes.
But by the way, who's doing like the like? It sounds like somebody's like patting on their leg or something. What was that?
Well, there's claps, which I read an interview where Clem Burke, took credit for having the idea to do the clapping rhythm, but it sounds like a bunch of people doing it. Might have been the whole band. Let's listen to that though. It's got its own
like ham bone, they used to call that.
It sounds like the ham bone that the girls would play on the street. It kind of fits because like whether you're doing the double dutch or like the ham bone, like that's the kind of street scene that just makes its way into the song.
Man, I love that. This is so special.
I wonder who's doing that in the studio. Somebody's really talented.
There's even more like Latin percussion coming up here in this next section, which is very New York sounding.
What's the Latin percussion sound?
Like whistles.
The whistles?
Timbales.
Love it. Oh, yeah. I'm going to offer up. I think that those bells are like a defining quality of the song, but
Very
the
much
song
so.
would also just not sound quite as New York without the saxophone. The saxophone
yeah.
is such like a
Let's talk about the saxophone.
late 70s, early 80s. It reminds me of the, wasn't it X who did, New York's all right if you like saxophones. Like the 80s fell back in love with the saxophone in like a major way. Maybe it
it's
was
so
the
New York,
function of the
too.
jazz.
It's so
Yes.
New York.
Yeah, the guy in the subway playing a saxophone,
Right.
like that guy's on it.
With a leg out the window on a hot New York night with a cigarette, right? That image.
Very
You've got
true.
him, you've got the girls doing hambo, and you got the whistles
Yeah.
from like Spanish
It's a very
Harlem.
New York song,
It's a very
made
New
in
York song.
LA.
Yeah.
Made in
Made
LA.
in LA.
Let's not forget. Here's another recurring character on one song. The saxes are played by our good friend. We don't actually know him, but we talk about him a lot. That's Tom Scott, who we've mentioned on many episodes.
Yes.
Tom Scott.
Tom Scott.
He's on a lot of records.
He's on a lot of records. He was on Steely Dan on that episode playing the Lyricon. He's also playing the Lyricon on Billie Jean by Michael Jackson.
Yes.
Captain and Tennille's Do That To Me One More Time.
He was
And he's
getting
playing
work.
the sax solo on Do You Think I'm Sexy by Rod Stewart.
And for the purposes of hip hop, he has a song called Today,
Yes.
which famously gets sampled into They Reminisce Over You.
So lovely. That's how we like to do it in the 90s. Rock CL Smooth.
He rocks.
Yes.
Smooth.
Yes, indeed.
Ooh,
Possibly
wow.
the greatest
Oh, my
jazz sample, if you want to call it jazz, possibly the greatest sample of the 90s. Sort of set the 90s off in
So
a
once
huge
a year,
way.
we give this gentleman his flowers on the show, and this episode is no
Tom
exception. He's playing 3 different lines that it's him overdubbing himself.
Wow.
So he's playing 3 sax parts. That's what you're hearing in the mix. It's
Oh, this
two
is so great to hear all this.
in unison and one.
This is like
playing
liner notes on steroids. Please continue.
We do not
I
take
love it.
steroids. for the record.
Absolutely. So he's playing 2 tenor sax lines in unison. So one note, the same note twice.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's playing a harmony. There's a third sax, which is playing a fourth underneath it. So there's a harmonization underneath the lead line. So I'll play that for you in the mix. The song would not be the song without Tom Scott. It's swinging. It's got a little behind the beat. A
Yes.
little behind the beat.
Oh my goodness, this is so great. Love this so much. He's breaking Rapture all the way down
All the
to
way
its
down.
smallest compound.
All right. Well, listen, we're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, we'll hear the very first rap verse to top the Billboard charts. And we'll hear how Fab Freddy's friendship with Blondie brought that band to the Bronx and, in turn, brought rap into the mainstream. Stick around, we'll break it down. All right, welcome back to One Song. Well, it wouldn't be the Rapture without a rap. But before we get to the rap, let's talk about the singing. I will admit that in the many times I've heard this song, I don't think I knew much more than Rapture. Like, her delivery is sort of whimsical. It's sort of like, I saw one place it was described as rapturous, like sort of intentionally sort of like more flowy than like punching out the words. Like,
Well, it's really the kind of floaty. It's like a little druggy. It's like slow. There's not a lot of words. There are very few words, and they're drawn out if you listen that way, which is a nice contrast to the rap sections. And then it gets kind of, the cadence picks up.
Totally, but when she's just singing, I think I was singing like "Tell us to tell." Like, I had no idea she was singing "toe to toe." Let's hear a little bit of Miss Debbie Harry's isolated vocals.
Yeah.
Toe to toe, dancing very close. Hang each night in rapture.
Gorgeous delivery.
I mean that vocal might be
Powerful. She's-
underrated.
Man, listen, what a great voice. I love it so much.
I mean, that's not easy to do.
when you hear Debbie Harry's isolated vocals, what does it make you think about? No, since you know the person who sang it.
Well, she's a real consummate artist. And, she, not long ago, she was working with a jazz band called the Jazz Passengers
Okay.
and was recording, and you could hear that jazz love or the way she just used her vocal in a jazzy kind of way.
Because she has like a smoky kind of jazzy voice when you think about it. Yeah.
Yes.
Very
and
smoky.
uses a total instrument. Really amazing just to hear it isolated like that. This is so dope. I love it.
So one thing I want to point out in the bridge melody, so that's the Phrygian part where we go up to dripping lightly, that little moment, which I broke down a moment ago in the music, has this sort of, jazzy moment to it. In particular, I was noticing how Rapture, that half step down, gives us another allusion to another episode. Go back to our Paint It Black episode. It's the same harmonic minor scale, which evokes a kind of Easternness to it, because you would normally have that be, normally if it were a quote unquote regular minor scale, she would sing Rapture, but she's only going a half step, Rapture. And that really takes us kind of out of the Americas and kind of like maybe even out of the 20th century.
Wow.
That one half note choice does a lot of work emotionally and sonically, I think, to our associations with what scale she's chosen.
Very
I don't know
cool.
that she's done this consciously. I have a feeling a lot of what she does is spontaneous and artistically improvisational and just the muse. But that is the effect, part of what the effect that I think it has on the listener.
Very cool. Yeah, I could hear definitely get what you're saying.
I'll play that one part against the chords so you can really hear it. She's bending her voice almost like a guitar player bending the note. It just has so much expression to it. It's Rapture.
Yes.
It's almost like sinister, like to use the word you used for the
I like that.
episode.
I like the idea of sinister.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yes.
I think it's ironic that she sings "People Hypnotize" and she sounds hypnotized.
And when she says hypnotize, it hypnotizes the listener.
Oh
It's
yeah,
one of those
definitely.
words.
I can't look away.
Yeah. So by the way, the instrumental track, when they were done, they just had an instrumental track with singing. There wasn't a rap yet. And Chapman says that when he asked Debbie what she envisioned for the rest of the song, because there was this huge 4-minute long gap, she stopped singing in the second verse after like 2 minutes. And then there's nothing until the very end. That was all they had when they recorded the song originally. So Mike Chapman says, when I asked her what she envisioned for the remaining 2/3, she said, a rap. I had no idea what she was talking about. Rap was new then. Debbie played me a few references. I said, great, it's crunch time. Go out there and rap. She said, well, I have to write it first. So they hadn't even written anything yet.
Wow.
So she and Chris went off, as she says, with a pen and pad. In 10 minutes, they were done. Debbie Harry says, there weren't any rules to writing a rap at that point. So I just wanted to capture the feeling we experienced in the Bronx. So all the lyrics about the Bronx experience. Do you want to talk about that?
So I'm in the mix with these people as TV party crew. I'm hanging with them. I'm telling them about this scene, how I feel it's comparable to the new wave and the punk scene. And everything felt like it was some underground stuff that was cool and edgy. And so it came to a point where I had met, in fact, when I first meet Grandmaster Flash, I meet the guy who was their manager. It was an ex-cop. His name was Ray Chandler. He was about 6'6", quite formidable guy. And I met him. And at first, I'm telling him who I am, and he thinks it's a bunch of shit. But then when I show him some magazines and some write-ups that reference what I'm trying to do, and so he's like, okay, what's up? So I go, listen, I want to bring my friends up to the Bronx to experience this. I want something that's safe and make sure everybody is going to be cool and whatever. So there's a gig he's promoting at he's managing Flash and / promoter at a PAL. That's a Police Athletic League, kind of like a community gathering place in communities. And there was one in the Bronx on 183rd and Webster. Okay. And there's a lineup of different groups performing, like Cold Crush and the Mercedes Ladies are performing there in a fantastic romantic vibe. And I get a whole group of, Chris, Debbie, some other people from the TV party crew, Glenn O'Brien.
How'd you get up there? Take the train or
no?
Cab?
We took some cabs up, and we took an OJ back. We actually 2 OJs, which was sort of like Uber in the hood.
Yeah, no,
Uber. They were decent cars. But what made OJ car service really cool was a lot of the drivers had tapes from the live parties.
Oh wow!
And a lot of the clientele were young folks or people in street corner pharmaceuticals. That had the money to book a car for an extended period of time. A lot of the early raps from these parties, guys would reference getting into an OJ. And, you know, I have an
never
OJ.
knew what that meant.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
an OJ on hold meant you was able to have it for 1 or 2 hours or more.
Just waiting for you.
Yeah, waiting for you. That was like, you were like, that
You
was
made it.
incredible. That was like rolling around with a limo driver or something. It was a big deal, but that was the thing. So when we left, they ordered us a couple of OJs. We went downtown and everybody
So
was
you were
awake.
up there in the Bronx with Chris and Debbie, and they were witnessing their first live rap experience.
Yeah, it was incredible. And when we were walking in, there was a bunch of young kids in the lobby, and this wasn't a scene where any white folks ever went. So they were like, yo,
the Beatles are here.
They thought, well, the popular dance on the hip hop scene at the time was a dance which called the Patty Duke, which was an older TV show that would be in reruns on local channels. And I guess in the opening of the show, Patty would do this kind of go-go dances, some 60s stuff.
60s, yeah.
And kids was like, yo. They saw Debbie, it's like, it's Patty Duke. And people laughed. And then the movie,
They've seen 5 white people their whole life.
you know, the movie, The Jerk, had recently
Steve
been
Martin,
out.
yeah.
And they Glenn O'Brien, he's the jerk. Look, the jerk.
With the white hair?
Patty Duke and the jerk.
Patty Duke and the Jerk are here.
They were just cracking up and snapping. You know, goofy. These white people, look at us. It's Patty Duke and shit. So you can hear people chuckling and laughing. And,
Hollywood is empty tonight. They all in the Bronx.
you know, it was incredible.
That's hilarious.
But I remember when I saw Debbie and a few days later, and we hooked up. She was like, "Oh my God!" The Mercedes ladies had on these cool outfits and these little Western hats, and Debbie was like, "Man, I thought those girls were great. You know, the Mercedes ladies, what they had on." So I was like, "Oh wow!" So they were picking up on stuff.
They were picking up on it
and felt the energy, felt the groove, you know, and went out to work with Mike Chapman in L.A. Not long after.
It's such a credit to Debbie and Chris that they were as people, they were open-minded. They were pulling in their influences. They were true New Yorkers, like at the crux of all of it. Understanding that this is this hodgepodge cultural stew, all of it is beautiful and good and interesting, and let's mix it up in our music.
That's so
let's
true.
Mix it up in our
and
taste.
They were the most prominent, biggest selling band out of that whole scene, and they so connected with what I was trying to do, and they work with a lot of other people. On Chris's label, Animal Records, he worked with a lot of really underground other acts like Walter Stedding, who was a part of the TV party, really just interesting. And the first people to buy paintings from me in New York, as well as Jean-Michel. They bought work and hired us numerous times. There was another video, a song that I thought could have been a huge hit called The Hardest Part. And they rented a giant seamless room. And me, Lee, and Jean-Michel Basquiat spray painted this whole room. I drew some soup cans and Lee did pieces, and it was a room where Debbie actually put on a black wig, and she had like a wild, crazy cut-up Barbarella-looking kind of outfit and performed amidst all this graffiti in this
hardest part.
Hardest part, which I felt could have been just as big as Rapture, but Rapture was first. I thought they could have did it, but they never released it as a single.
Man, I just wish I could have been friends with y'all back then. That would have been so much freaking fun to just hang out.
It was incredible.
Now we got to talk about the rap and Rapture. I'm going to give credit to my co-host Luxury. He was the person who pointed this out because this is the first hip-hop song to go #1 on the charts.
Yeah.
And the first words rapped are your name. Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you so much.
You are the first, a part of hip-hop history for that reason alone, and for several other major reasons.
You are the first hit rap lyric.
Exactly. Let's hear the rap.
Fab Freddy told me everybody's fly. DJ spinning, I said, my, flash is fast, flash is cool. Francois, c'est pas, flash ain't no do.
How do you stop this, man?
I know, it's so hard to stop. It's
so
such
crazy.
I have questions,
So
okay?
much fun.
First of all, we do want to confirm, because there's been debate online about the Flash. I think now we are agreed that Flash is Grandmaster Flash.
Oh, without question.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, but there were people online who was like, oh no, Flash was a downtown drug dealer who they knew, and if you order from him, he would show up fast.
Wow.
Guys, don't shoot the messenger.
That's crazy. I never heard that.
You never heard
one.
that? It was out there. The other thing that's under great debate is the Francois line. Francois c'est pas, flasher no do.
Okay.
It's not quite French. It's a little bit French. It means Francois, c'est pas, kind of like a guy called Francois isn't great. You know, it's a little bit implying that.
Okay.
But then the rest of it's not quite, doesn't really mean anything.
Okay.
I always took it as sort of like French gibberish to sort of sound like sort of fancy and sort of like an early 80s way.
Okay.
But there are people online who say, no, she was talking about Francois K.
Francois Kevorkian.
Saying that his type of DJing, which was sort of a style of disco DJing, was not that great. We like Flash. So it's like, Flash is cool. Francois,
not cool.
Wow.
Which, you know, can we say definitively now that we know that she's not talking about
Fab Freddy set the record straight.
I mean, I would say it's definitely about Grandmaster Flash. That's why he was fast. As I would be explaining what was going on the early rap / hip hop scene. Him, Flash, being a DJ and being very fast at it, hence the name Flash.
Makes so much sense.
Was super significant. And these were things that they kind of like just put into this record, which was an echoing of things that I shared, along with the Everybody's Fly on the early hip hop scene. There were fly guys and fly girls. That was slang of the scene at that time. And that's what I told them. So they were really verbatim, quoting me, if you will. Or here's what Fab told me.
You, by the way, speaking of which, and by the way, I think we've also said that, like, to our knowledge, nobody was taking shots at Francois K. So the first hip hop,
I would say
number one, is not also the first disc record. So we're not saying that.
Yes.
Do you think if they had recorded in New York that you would have jumped on the track?
No, because I wasn't. Listen, the amazing thing, and I'll definitely share with you what happened was they went away. They were gone for a couple of months making this record. They came back. I've been hanging out with them quite regularly, having these sessions, them helping me advise on things that I wanted to do. I'm trying to emerge as an artist, as a cultural shaker and whatever. And so they basically said, oh, come by the house. We've got some records we want to share with you, some of the new stuff we've done. So they play me a couple of songs from the new Auto American album, and I'm digging it. Then Chris says, okay, here's something different. Puts on Rapture. They're really watching me intently.
Yeah, they want your approval, probably.
Well, Debbie starts off singing. I love it. And the intro to the song. And then she starts rapping. And I am shocked. I'm also flattered and kind of humbled because what I immediately think is they were just goofing around in the studio and did this track as like a little playful throwaway just to show me that they really got it. Because Chris didn't prep me like, we're going to try this rapping thing.
A rap song.
We want to make sure you think this will pass muster or whatever. So I listened to that and I was just blown away that I thought that just playfully they had did this as a throwaway, but just to show me that they really got all this stuff. Because I hear my name, I'm telling them about Flash, he's the fastest, and this is cool. And then she references Have Your Party on TV. That's a reference to TV Party and stuff like that. So I'm like, oh, that's so cool, so sweet. And that's how I left it. That's what I literally thought was the case until 2 months later, I'm in Paris for the first time. After the second art exhibit in Milan, I'm hanging out with Chris and Tina from the Talking Heads that have a new group that they've recently launched called the Tom Tom Club.
Yes.
We leave a party together with David Byrne and the B-52s. We're all hanging out in Paris at the same time. We're on our way to get a bite to eat.
There. You definitely don't want to be there.
Jesus, all this, so much FOMO. Come on.
It's crazy. And we're in a cab, and I'm in the cab, and we're heading to La Cupola, whatever, to eat. And this song comes on in this guy's cab.
Wow.
And I go, this fucking cab driver, get a copy of this song. Because this is the thing I thought they did just as a goof. And Chris France says, no, Freddie, that's the new Blondie single.
The new single.
I'm like, huh? That's how I learned that this is a real record.
And then minutes later, they went on to do Wordy Rapping Hood themselves with rapping in it.
Sure did.
Right?
Words in papers, words in books, words on TV, words for crooks, words of comfort, words of peace, words to make the fighting cease, words to tell you
They sure did Wordy Rapping, which is really dope. Those records that they put out.
That first Tom Tom Club, it's an all-timer.
Insane.
An all-timer.
Really well
Genius
done.
of Love is one of my top 3 songs of all time, I would say.
Wow.
I love that too.
They hit it Right. So I was like, oh, wow, you dudes, they were beginning to pop, and they were a couple with part of the Talking Heads band, the rhythm section, whatever. And that was just incredible. And that's how I realized this is a real record. It was shocking and surprising. And then I began to go like, wow, how's this going to work? Because the rap is great, but it's kind of weird. It's different. It's a little slightly goofy, if you will. It's not, but it's remarkably, it goes on to be number one and, set the table for a lot of what would soon come.
Absolutely.
Because nobody knew this was a whole movement. There was a scene. People had heard the first couple of rap records that came out, including Rapper's Delight, unless you knew. People thought this was some kind of 1, 2 off, 3 off kind of a
well, you really
fad. They all called it a fad.
What you're underscoring too is like what I'm thinking about is how like it really ought to have been a novelty record. It should have been a Dr. Demento record.
Thank you.
Something about it was a little bit richer than that, like a little deeper, and it's stood the test of time. It's 45 years old.
It's incredibly true. But what helped a great deal is the gentleman I talked about earlier played the hell out of it. Frankie Crocker on WBLS. Who was the arbiter.
That gave it cred.
Another unsung hero for this episode, no doubt.
Another unsung hero, a big influence on me and my musical taste. And boom, that helped a lot. And the record connected with people across the spectrum. It wouldn't be till some years later when I was hosting your MTV Raps and the initial press on who the hell I was began to hit. This is the guy that Debbie
they're talking about, right?
On Rapture.
So it's like an ambassador.
Kind of a cultural ambassador, but it was sort of like an Easter egg or a piece to the puzzle that finally fit.
Now it precedes you wherever you go on planet Earth. Fab Freddy.
It does.
Everybody knows that lyric.
But people would butcher, you know how it is with music, and I'm sure you can relate, where you're singing along with a record and you're saying the wrong shit totally, but you don't care. You're just singing, it's my joint. And people would butcher, it would be Fly Freddy and Vi Freddy. And,
that's the Mondegreen.
It would be like, dude, it'd be like, that's how I could get my name all butchered.
Well, let's not get started at sacrociliac. Oh my God, that crazy word.
Yes. In the audio version of my book, Everybody's Fly, I talked to several people that are key in my story and in the storytelling, and I got to do that with Chris and Debbie from Blondie. So you hear this in the audiobook. And I never knew at one point we were talking, and I said, well, tell me how the whole Rapture song came together. They were laying in bed, and Chris just said, hey, Debbie, let's make a rap song and call it Rapture.
Literally a dad joke. Literally a pun.
Literally. And Debbie says, that's a great idea. And Chris goes on to writing most of the lyrics, which surprised me because Debbie sells the song. I never checked the credits, as I'm sure you guys do get all the details. But I just figured that. But then it made sense because it would be Chris that I would spend most of the time hanging with, giving him all these nuances about what's going on the rap scene, soon to be the hip hop scene.
It's funny that you bring that up because I will say that growing up, in a different era of hip hop, I assumed this was like a freestyle. You know what I mean? Like, so the idea, but once you figure out where its placement is in rap's development, you're like, no, someone definitely wrote this out. You break up the part about Mars, which we want to hear some more from. You had a verse about Mars that you think...
One of my raps that I had was, I was born and raised on the planet Mars, where I used to chill and rock with the stars. So one day I got bored and decided to split. I came to Earth on a rocket ship, crash landed in this park. It was a full moon out and very dark. Somebody was rapping upon the mic, and then I got up on the mic and I rocked all right and blah, 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 blah. So that was just a little example I'd give. Hey, here's what a rap sounds like.
Right.
This is my little rap, Man from Mars.
It might have had a little influence on what Debbie and Chris brought to this rap song. Maybe, because they were friends with yours. They probably heard that rap from you.
And it comes right down and it lands on the ground, and out comes a man from Mars, and you try to run, but he's got a gun, and he shoots you dead, and he eats your head, and then you're in the man from Mars.
But also, definitely I think it was a bit of an inspiration, but Chris was also into sci-fi and into B-movie, sci-fi, Planet Mars, Plan 9 from outer space and stuff like that. So it was just a nice, perfect gumbo, if
Yes.
you will. It was a nice mix of cool stuff in a unique way, as opposed to trying to be like a New York rapper. They put their own little personality and flavor
And it
into
should be said, this is before rap got so codified that like, no, that's a Nas verse or that's a Jay-Z verse. Like a lot of what went into Rapper's Delight, for example, were little bits of pieces of raps from other rappers from before the Sugar
Well,
Hill
a
days.
huge part of it, the whole verse of Big Bag Hank is
Tesla, no
verbatim
Puff
Grandmaster Caz's lyrics.
That's why
Literally
he
spelling out
spelled
his name.
His name, right?
on, Hank, sing that song. Check it out, I'm the CAS and the OVA and the rest is FLY. You see, I go by the code of the doctor of the mix.
Yeah, I mean, even when he says, you know, I'm the CAS, he spells out Casanova
Yes.
Fly. That was Grandmaster Caz's, you know, other rap name.
How did
if you
Kaz
will.
feel about that when he heard that song do the numbers that it did?
You know, Kaz has dealt with that, I think, in such an incredible way. And he's got a whole rap about that situation, which is epic and incredible. I think he's been really classy about it. It's a very unfortunate situation that he wasn't compensated. I know you guys get into the splits and all that, which is super significant. But unfortunately, that was, I think, a part of Sugar Hill's legacy. Is they unfortunately they weren't as equitable as they should have been with their acts. I think had they would have moved better, they could have been the biggest that ever did it, because everybody would have ran to them to put their, you know, all the rappers that would come. If they would have did good business.
Everybody would have essentially wanted to be their ghostwriter because they had this big platform at that time.
You know, there's another little story that I just wanted to share briefly. I don't want to do too, but Debbie Harry Blondie was pretty much a Debbie Harry solo thing. It got to host Saturday Night Live. And at that time, they got to pick who the support band would be, if you will. And at this time, we'd been friends a good while. I've explained a lot of the nuances and what was going on. But still, there was no major spotlight on this rap thing, on this early hip hop thing. And they said, Freddie, we want to bring one of these groups on that you've been telling us about. And I was like, wow. I said, well, man, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five are incredible. The Cold Crush are amazing. The Fantastic Romantic Five, the Fantastic Freaks. But I said, there's one group with 4 males and a girl out front, the Funky 4+1. And the girl is Sha Rock. And he's like, oh, wow. And so that became the first group to perform on national television.
First rap. Rap
You're
group
behind
on
the
national
scenes
TV.
orchestrating this entire thing, aren't you? That's the Fab Five Freddy. You're
I played
modest, but that's what's happening.
I played my position, absolutely.
did.
But that was my intent, was to, you know, and I was able to circumvent a lot of BS by connecting with people on that new wave scene that saw what was coming, believed in it, got these ideas that I shared, like the rebellious nature, but it was getting none of the incredible press that, you know, the Sounds and Melody Maker and the Village Voice were all reporting on this incredible new stuff. So they got that and wanted to help make that happen, and they were able to get a hit out of it while also sharing that love and shouting me out and talking about Flash. And so when they made the music video, I was like, listen, let's get Flash to play himself. So they had a turntable and a mixer. I said, Flash, we're going to be here. The music videos was still a kind of a new thing, but I said, Flash, these guys have shouted you out. I'm tight with them. Boom, boom, boom. Flash never shows up. So Jean-Michel Basquiat, we were all hanging out at that time, and I said, and Jean was there as in, you know, to take part. All of the people walking around in the video, most of them were our friends. I said, I'll show Jean how to do it, and he could stand in for Flash. So nobody had seen this DJ thing yet, really. But I'm like, Jean, it's simple. You just hold a mixer and do this, and put your hand on the turntable and just gesture like this a little bit.
Yeah.
And so he was like, okay, cool. But when the camera's rolling and Debbie walks right up, that's Jean-Michel Basquiat standing there with the little pork pie hat on. And she delivers the first line. But Jean forgets to do what I showed him.
He's just kind of standing
I'm
there.
just going to stand here and have a little grin on my face. And it always makes it so funny because I'm like, Jean, come on, you were supposed to like. But he was like, I'm not trying to play myself. I don't know what this is. I ain't seen Flash or none of these DJs cut, scratch, and mix yet. But it all worked
Nowadays,
out.
everybody has. The number of times a commercial have a dog with headphones on going like this. Like everybody knows what DJing is.
Exactly.
But it was undiscovered. That is such an iconic rap video. What else can you tell us about that day? Can I ask a dumb question? It looks almost like it was shot on the streets of New York, but that's a set, right?
It's a set. It's a sound stage,
okay.
a modest sound stage.
Yeah.
But they are coming out of Pravda, that bar, right, on Lafayette Street. Yeah.
Whoa.
No, I read an interview where, because I recognized it, and it sure, because I used to live 2 blocks or work 2 blocks away.
Yeah,
That's
that was
Pravda,
Rudolph from Danceterias.
the Puck Building, right? You know the Puck Building?
Yes, I know it
right
well.
Underneath it. Yeah.
Yes, that's amazing. You know, I never went, but Rudolph, who later became quite prominent, he was the main owner of Danceteria, a very popular club. He was behind Pravda. I remember hearing about it because Pravda was a Russian newspaper.
The coolest underground
so it was
bar.
It was very, very, very cool.
Of course, it was
scene.
named Pravda.
Yeah. The other thing is interesting about the Rapture video is which is a part of the connection that I had with them is they commissioned myself, Lee Quinones, and Jean-Michel. We did graffiti and spray painted stuff all on that set. So I did a piece that said rap, which we're faking because we came in early.
It was finished, right?
We finished it. We didn't want fumes all over everywhere for everybody. Lee did a piece that said Lee, and Jean-Michel did his like kind of same-o phrases and little graffiti in and around that. So that was another little subtext.
Who has the pieces of that set? That must be worth a fortune.
I was going to say, do those pieces still exist?
I seriously doubt it. None of us had hit, especially Jean-Michel, who went through the roof.
It's so insane what we've lost because we thought it had no value. I mean, like, it's just...
Good point.
There's so much... I literally, when I went back and watched it now, it's like, where is this Lee piece? Where is this rap piece? Like,
well, you know, that was a part of what I was working to do. That's a very good point that you mentioned. And that's what they were looking to do to help us and to showcase what we were doing, because that's what I was looking to do. Get our work in front of people that can see it as art. And that
treat it seriously like
and treat it seriously and just look at it seriously and open your mind as opposed to the complete negative blowback that we got constantly without saying, but wait a minute, that's not a bad business. Guy can create, a guy can paint. Maybe we should figure out a way that we can get this incredible talent that was born right here in the streets.
With your awareness of punk rock and your art history as an artist yourself, I can't help but ask you this. Were you thinking about even subconsciously, and you mentioned Andy Warhol, Malcolm McLaren and the Sex Pistols, was that in your mind at all? Or?
Well, interestingly...
Let's talk about Malcolm.
Very much so. So being that I was close to the scene and meeting and reading the face and NME and sounds and stuff, I got a sense, and I would later meet Johnny Lydon and all those guys when they hit the scene. We would all intersect, and they basically had a very like disgruntled kind of vibe towards Malcolm because they basically were like, he was a slick businessman guy that was able to get, he controlled, got the money essentially. And so they were pissed. When he did come to town to tap into what was going on with hip hop, it was Lady Blue who organized the Roxy and managed the Rocksteady crew to help really blow the scene up. She wanted me to connect with him, and I just took a pass on that from what I had learned and knew from guys in the class, because I was just like, you know, I'm a step back from that one. But it was Michael Holman that did take him up to the Bronx, took him to Bronx River, kind of gave him a close-up look, and what he did was remarkable. In fact, he brought all the elements together with a good record, Buffalo Girls and the other records, in a remarkable way.
I like Dancing Like a Hobo. I like all those. Those are some cool songs.
Amazing.
For Buffalo Girls, go around the outside, round the outside, round the outside. For Buffalo Girls, go around the outside.
And to tap into the Supreme Team, which had one of the 2 or 3 very obscure rap radio station shows at that time. I think they came on something like on a Tuesday at 2 a.m. or something. You'd be up with a fresh tape in the box ready to record, because the Supreme Team was the best. Later there would be Mr. Magic on New York radio that would open it up, and then he would be on this WHBI station, which was similar to public access. You got a slot and you paid a few dollars to have it, but then it would go to BLS and then 98.7 KISS. But Malcolm McLaren captured the essence of the Supreme Team. These 2 guys, they were 5 percenters, which is a black Muslim offshoot. They had a lot of flavor. They would play break beats. They were super cool. You can go on YouTube and hear some of their episodes and stuff. And Malcolm made this really good record ahead of the curve of people being able to really create something that was a unified version of what this hip hop thing is all about. So it was brilliant the way he can do that, and he did. And then went on to do like an opera record. It was like Madame Butterfly. That was
and
also,
he did the first version of Vogue before Madonna did it, right down to the same black and white video aesthetic.
He tapped into that scene. So he was really good at seeing subcultures and showcasing them in pretty effective ways that were true to the roots, tap into the core individuals.
And it's not to compare you to him at all, but certainly like you, Andy Warhol, and Malcolm McLaren, what you share is this sort of cultural orchestrator role. Executed very differently, and with different, perhaps, ethical standards. I think higher ones in your case than in Malcolm's case. Culture vulture with great output, like he's a mixed bag of a figure in music history.
Correct.
But I'm a huge Bow Wow Wow fan. I'll go to the mat for Bow Wow Wow. Sex Pistols.
That's true.
He managed the New York Dolls for a minute. The man's very important in music history.
He was brilliant, essentially.
But I think the three of you, I think that you have operated in a similar way as a high-level cultural orchestrator, as a connector of scenes and music and style and art. So it's really interesting to think about your role in a similar way.
Thank you so much. Yeah, things fell in place in ways that obviously some things were specifically designed and intent, but when you put yourself, which I found over the years, and I talk about in my book, a lot of amazing things came my way that weren't on my agenda, but I had to suss it out and really think deeply. Am I going to take this move? Like getting to host the first rap show on MTV.
Full circle. MTV puts the Rapture on. It's like their first time they're showing a rap video, and then you come full circle and you're hosting MTV's rap show.
The producers that were on staff at MTV, one of them, Peter Doherty, and also Ted Demme, both are sadly no longer with us.
Yeah.
They were campaigning and they were like, he's the guy. Because Peter was on the downtown scene and knew all the moves I was making, who I was moving with. We were intersecting on that scene. He was like, and he's the guy that's in the Rapture video. He's right there, which was one of the first videos MTV had to play. So they were like, let's try this out. And the ratings were through the roof. They thought the Nielsen machine had broken or been hacked or something.
Or somebody had been paid. Yeah, no,
Correct.
It makes sense.
And it all worked beyond expectations. So those things happened and framed up and helped shape up and extend on the platform that I was trying to build. I just was trying to present this in a way that people can see us in a much better light, understand us as creatives, which not just myself, but when I got in, I opened the door and held the door open and Jean-Michel and I would talk about, it can't just be me and him. Let's bring in other people. And that was like Crash and Days and Futura and Ramel Z, the cats that we felt were creative, unique individuals that can help, do their own thing in this new space.
If you want to hear something that you may not have been exposed to, that really I think it helps encapsulate that period in time. After you listen to Rapture by Blondie, go back and listen to Beat Bop.
Yeah.
By Ramel Z.
Right things all soon you'll see. Life ain't no more a joke, it's a serious thing. When you're dealing with the answers that you can't explain.
Ramel Z and K-Rob.
And K-Rob.
Of course, I turned Jean-Michel on to hip-hop. When we first meet, I have tapes. When I meet all these people, even for Chris and Debbie, I had live tapes from Bronx gigs of Cold Crush, of Fantastic. So these are how this all spread through the city. And that's why most people that was with this had a boombox with a double cassette player.
Yes.
So you can bust off a 90-minute copy for your homie because it was
might be fifth generation by that point, but it's
definitely fifth generation.
It gives it more grit, authentic grit in that fifth generation.
Authentic grit baked in. And that was how it all spread and got around. And so I turned Jean-Michel on, there's this new thing going on. Tapes like, wow, he's loving it. Then he was like, wait, I can do this too. Took Ramel Z and K-Rob into the studio and made that beat. And that's interesting too, because that's before rap was structured and guys would have records where they rap for 15, 20 minutes. It just
that was the whole thing. People were like, you can't put rap on a record because how would that even sound? These guys are on the mic all night. So what would even be? But to your credit, on another level, you went to Melly Mel in 1979, I think it was, and you were like, hey, man, you need to make a rap record. He's like, what are you talking about? Are you crazy?
Do you ever think of making a record? He looked at me, he's like, who would buy it?
Who would buy it?
These guys are not thinking like that at that time.
They were not thinking like that.
Soon after, they would be shown the light. And once again, this was something that Sylvia And Sugar Hill Records saw it. Like, they had a sense, but they just saw how big it was in the communities, in the urban communities in New York City. It was like a no-brainer. Enjoy, the local label called Enjoy.
I know Enjoy.
Released,
I've seen that label.
They put out Super Rappin' and a few other records. I think maybe Spoonie G's record, who was this super cool solo rapper.
G.
Before we had Big Daddy Kane and Rakim and everything, this cat was like he was it. I guess what Sugar Hill was able to do was to push it out nationally and get it played outside of the New York area. And people loved it. And as they say, the rest kind of is history.
Luxury, now that we've learned so much about the song, can you tell us how the splits break down?
Well, listen, there's a couple of different numbers out there. So just to be clear, splits are often in contention, and what's publicly available is not necessarily where things will go or the end of the story. But the credits on the record say that it's 50-50 Chris Stein and Debbie Harry. But I did find one claim somewhere in PRS specifically for the deeper credit nerds out there. In PRS, there's a third that has been claimed, I believe, by the estate of Clem Burke. So it's interesting to kind of note, having listened to his hi-hat pattern, maybe recognizing that it had a say in what the rapping cadence may have turned out to be. I'm not sure what's going on with this, but there is a possibility that Clem Burke, or his estate, I should say, since he passed recently, might be cut into the songwriting, publishing credits on the song. But to be clear, it's clearly it's unsettled business right now.
Well, Freddie, we talked a lot about this song. We want to talk about the legacy of this song. Let's start there. What do you think the legacy of Rapture is?
It's an important piece in introducing and setting the table, I feel. Many people that heard Rapture, some of the earliest rap records that did break out of New York, beyond the fact that people thought novelty at first or just whatever, this is some kind of weird kind of thing, it set the table. Well, I guess, Wild Style, the film that I was a big part of, didn't have a national release, but it showed, that was the first showing that this is a scene. This is a culture developing in urban areas in New York City. And if you then listen to the Rapture, Rapture, they were rapping. Oh, and these guys were doing graffiti in the background. It helped set the table for what would come. In fact, once again, when Peter Doherty and Ted Demme were lobbying the execs at MTV to put a rap show on, they were like, look, this is a part of the story, along with the fact that Run DMC, LL Cool J, early Houdini, these records were going gold with little to no marketing at all. So they were like, look what we have here. And here's this channel, which is looking at music videos. And that was one of the first music videos MTV played. So as time progressed and people understood more of the story from connecting the dots from other things that happened, even like well aware, people didn't know who the hell a Fab Freddy was or what that was. But when Your MTV Raps happened and became this big, highly rated show on the channel, the press that we would get would reference, this is who this guy is. And then they go, wow. So a piece came together and people got the complete picture. And then the fact that they weren't a band that was just trying to rip the culture off.
No, it doesn't come across that way.
They shared love and shouted people out and did it in a sincere kind of way that added to, I think, a big part of what hip hop has been about, like exchange and interchange. And I looked at the relationship that I developed with them as a cultural exchange. I'm sharing these new things. And I told him I was a big fan of Andy Warhol. The first time I met Andy officially, Andy Warhol was hanging out with Chris and Debbie.
I want to bring this up because this is sort of what has not been stated explicitly, but it is all through your book, Everybody's Fly. Go check it out. It's just that you saw art and you heard music, you saw dancing, you saw culture, you know, and I love in your book when you talk about like it was every bit a school of art as much as Impressionism and Dadaism and all that stuff.
Like, I wanted to make those connections to show people that it connected like those movements did. I felt strongly.
It was a full picture. And that leads me to a question that's part legacy, but also part where goes hip hop from here? Because I think that a lot of our frustration, and this is, I think, across generations, I think a lot of our frustration is that maybe because the internet gives us access to so much immediately that it's hard to find underground culture now and truly get excited because it's almost like, you know, where do you go? Like it used to be like that late night radio show that came on at 2 a.m. that was an early adopter, or, you know, maybe it was that, you know, pirate radio station if you were in the UK.
Yes.
Why do you think it's so hard for us to find new culture, for all of us to get excited about it? Is it because we're so dispersed with our different ways in? I don't want to answer this question for you.
No.
But I feel like you must have an opinion.
Well, I think that's a part and parcel of the problem is we have immediate access to a million songs, let's just say, in the devices in our pockets. And I think it's, do we or don't we post what we're doing immediately online for the world to kind of see and share? I think sometimes being able to hold back is important in the creative process, comparing it to what came before. Hip hop had a good 10, 15 years to develop, for its roots to go deep before it got exposed on Yo MTV Raps. And then other states and other countries around the world jumped on board. I think that's one part of the issue. But I feel definitely there's interesting things going on. I think one of the problems happens when these things get exposed maybe too early, and then the people rush in and get all over it and pick it dry, and the artists themselves may not understand initially how it's good to hold back a bit until you've really developed something, or you've really, you know, I'm sure you've heard stories about different acts that didn't hit on the first album, and record companies were invested in developing an act, getting all aspects together, believing in you over the long run and building you up to a certain point. So I don't quite have all the answers, but I do know that there are interesting things going on. When I meet people doing interesting things musically or what have you, I'm like, please hit me with some links so I can see what you're doing, what you're listening to, because this is a zillion songs out there. Who's going to be that kind of filter,
arbiter,
you know what I'm talking about?
I think it's me and LUXXURY. I think we will gladly take on that role.
No, you guys are doing a really good job, and the way you dissect music is so informative, and you learn so much, like what the blue notes are and all these kind of things that I'm like, you've heard and felt, but I didn't really know the definitive way to do it. So, I mean, there's good things about where we are, and there's certainly problematic things. I think, you know, how you hold back on, once again, exposing it all too soon online, but also knowing where to dig down deep and find those interesting little kernels of things that are happening. It's a search that we must do.
Let me ask you a question, just as a fan of yours from Yo MTV Raps.
Sure.
Was there ever a song or an artist that you like pushed Yo MTV Raps to play where they're like, no, we can't do that one?
Oh, no, that never happened. We had control over Yo MTV Raps.
That's
In fact, with Ted and Peter stepped back after a while, and it was pretty much Ted Demme that ran things. And Ted had really good taste, but they would run everything by me. Like when a new act came through, they wanted to make sure that we were all in sync on it. It wasn't from top down, hey guys, whatever, because there were
Play
things.
these 10 videos.
Hell no. They trusted us to go out and do it and find the acts and, you know, what are we going to showcase on the show? And we were aware we were looking to showcase. We knew it had all been born, bred, and collard green fed in New York. But we were like, well, we got to represent the rest of the country now, because we're hearing that there's this guy in Miami who was at the time Luke Skywalker in the True Live crew. And Philly, I've always looked at.
Also, very not worried about a cease and desist letter.
He definitely wasn't. But the first time we traveled, the big joy for hosting Yo MTV Raps was getting to travel to these other places to showcase. And so we immediately were like, well, when Peter said, man, how would you want to do the show? I said, man, I just don't want to be cooped up in the studio with the green screen and goofy shit going on like all the other VJs did. I said, man, that's whack. I said, I'd be more comfortable in the street if Cass is in their basement putting beats together. I want to talk to them there and feel that energy. And they said, let's do that. So that's what we did, because I was just as curious to understand what was going on in Houston's Fifth Ward with the Ghetto Boys, or when we did NWA's first time on TV. We began at the Welcome to Compton sign, and then we rented a flatbed truck so we can drive around and people can see LA, see South Central. So the desire to do that and the filmmaker in me wanting to show some good images was what we got to do, and it worked remarkably well. The problem developed a few years in when they got hip. Like, for instance, you have a company like Guess who's spending money to advertise on your MTV Raps, and then you have numerous people in numerous videos wearing FUBU shirts, and then them learning that, oh, this is a brand, and they're getting free advertising worn by the groups. And Guess is like, what the hell? Like, we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, and these guys are just, so that became a problem with videos. MTV was like, well, the label
that's why they started blurring them out to please the paying sponsors.
Well, because you got guys paying, and then you got groups wearing like
all Hilfiger,
Magic City. If that was a hot brand, they'd be like, well, this guy's got the Magic City on, and we've got to pay for ad space. So that became problematic. But the labels took their time to blur these things out. And other video shows developed, like BET finally developed their rap show. Yeah. And they didn't have those same issues. They let the guys wear whatever. And
Rap City was a whole other story.
It was a whole other story eventually when that jumped off. But it was good. Initially, we had free reign, and we broke many acts. And was like, if we loved it, we're playing it, and it would go crazy. We'd hear stories about the record sales going crazy the week after the show aired. It was just such a cool thing to help people out. And,
that was a good time.
And give them some, showcase them on TV. I would pull groups to the side. They'd be so nervous. Oh my God, I got this mic in my hand. I'd walk them over and just, dude, this is all good. Cass would be stuttering and nervous. I said, look, man, we'll do this again. If you screw up, I'll sometimes say something that's overly ebonic. My producers would be like, Fab, you just said da-da-da-da. I'd be like, what? I said that? We definitely, we gonna reshoot this shit. Said some ebonic bananas craziness. But it was fun. And it was amazing to see that happen and to be a big spark in the game.
I love that.
Well, Fab Freddy, thank you so much for coming on our little show. It's such an honor to have you here.
Can I just say that the first time I went to CBGB's exploring this whole new wave punk scene, and that was the venue, the first band I saw perform were the Cramps.
Oh,
and I love
wearing my Cramps shirt for all you audio.
And it's funny that your name is Lux.
Lux Interior.
Lux Interior was the lead of the Cramps, and his girl was there, Ivy. They were
Poison Ivy. Yep.
Poison Ivy. They were incredible to me, and they scared the shit out of me. And the fact that
I'll bet at the time before they became known, right? What would it have been like to see them in 79?
It was like scary. They were like incredible in the vibe, and they looked
Creatures from the Black Leather Lagoon.
Just the austere, gritty griminess of CBGBs and this band. I'm like, oh, is this kind of band really kind of scare you a bit?
Because they're doing this horror kind of gothic swamp rock.
Rockabilly swamp rock. I like that.
Yeah.
And they were
fight
intense.
the crowd sometimes?
No, so the band that had opened for them was James White.
And the Blacks.
Oh.
Or James Chance.
Became James White and the Blacks, but his initial band was the Contortions.
The Contortions, right.
And so the Contortions were the support band that night at CBGB's. What James White would do famously was start a fight or punch people down front, and he'd like just get out. He'd be punk rock, and he might slap somebody or whatever. That was like a part of the act, which was crazy.
He'd get back on stage bleeding.
Listen, there was a band, these tough white dudes from Brooklyn called Straight Edge. They were some real rumblers, and unfortunately, the guy that James White thought he could hit was one of these dudes. They beat the shit out of him.
Oh, man.
And he gets back up on stage at CBGB's, blood flowing out his nose, finished the whole set.
Oh, man.
Like,
Would have loved to have seen that.
Like, this is the
That
craziest
sounds
shit
incredible.
ever. Like, this dude is bleeding. He's grabbing me singing and the blood is everywhere. I'm like, this shit is wild. And then the Cramps, come on. It was a scene.
Oh man, the Cramps they're one of my favorite bands. I used to see them play in San Francisco every Halloween because that was their they would make the rounds
Wow.
when I was a teenager growing up. So
That's
huge fan of
amazing.
that band. I love that you love
Did
them
you ever
too.
see the footage when they played at a mental
no.
institution
No.
for
Sounds
people
horrifying.
in this? The
I
clip
think that's on YouTube. I think I know what you're
is
talking
on
about.
YouTube,
Yeah.
and it is genius and insane. Like literally these people in the crowd
Yeah.
and the group performing.
Somebody told me you people are crazy, but I'm not so sure about that. You seem to be all right with me. The way I walk is just the way.
It was, whoa! It was a moment.
They had their own thing, yeah. And at the time, I'm sure you didn't know if there was a wink or not. You're like, are these guys scary?
Yeah.
Are they cartoon characters? Are they the real deal?
Yes, it was a nice.
Did you
mix
meet
of-
them? Did you ever talk to them?
I met Lux once. We just spoke briefly. I think at Bleecker Bob's, in fact, which was
Record
the
store?
Bob's.
record store where I
Yeah.
bought my first punk records.
Right off of 8th.
Right off of 8th on Bleecker Street. And he was a really rude guy. He was like a soup Nazi of the record store game.
He's the archetype for the rude guy who works at the record store.
Basically.
Totally.
He's that guy. And Lux was in there one day, and I was like, oh, wow, Lux, hi. He was like, hey. But that was intense.
What
So,
I wouldn't give to have gone through to have experienced what you experienced.
Yeah, it was
And it's all in your book, which is called Everybody's Fly,
Yes.
out now. Where can people get or find out about your new book, Fab?
Oh, it's
Freddy?
available everywhere fine books are sold, and as well as the Audible and Spotify for the audio version, which is a lot of special treats. So
And some
you can,
interviews.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you could turn them pages. There's a great photo insert. I worked really hard to get with
great
photographers
photos.
from back then to dig into their crates to find really never before published photos of myself, Jean-Michel, a lot of stuff I pulled there. Even though the photos are not that big, they're the real deal in terms of how it looked back then and some of the key players. Cool shot with me, Keith Haring, and JFK Jr. that I got out of the Keith's archive, out of his estate, showed me stuff. So it was really fun to put it together to share all these stories. and some
Congratulations on
pictures.
finishing it, getting it out there, and going
I'll
on
say it's
tour.
such a good read. It's such a fun read.
Thank you, man.
I put up there with some of the best, music bios I've ever read.
Thank you so
Sincerely.
much, man. It really means a lot to have it, to sharing it. And the feedback I'm getting is good. I'm out here in LA. We had a big book event at the Loge Room last night, and Roger Guenvere Smith, the incredible actor,
Yes,
did a
great
talk
actor.
with me. He's a good friend, and a lot of my old school LA friends from Delicious Vinyl, which I talk all about the guys that started that label, which was the big rap label out here before
Huge.
Ruthless.
Yes.
Those guys were my buddies, and I talk about meeting them, and they all came out last night, so it's really fun.
Well, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, man.
As always, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok. You can find me on Instagram at Diallo, Diallo, and on TikTok at Diallo Riddle.
And you can find me on Instagram at LUXXURY and on TikTok at LuxuryXX.
And you can follow our podcast on Instagram and TikTok at One Song Podcast for exclusive content. You can also watch full episodes of One Song on YouTube. Just search for One Song Podcast. We'd love it if you like and subscribe.
Also, be sure to check out the One Song Spotify playlist for all the songs we discuss in these episodes. You can find the link in our episode description.
And if you've made it this far, you're officially a part of the One Song Nation. Show us some love, give us 5 stars, leave a review, and send this episode to a fellow music fan. It really helps keep the show thriving.
And by the way, if you're looking for even more music facts, more conversations between Diallo and LUXXURY, and basically more of us, we've got a Patreon now. You can find us at patreon.com/Diallo LUXXURY. That's right, Diallo LUXXURY.
Luxury, help me in this thing.
I'm producer, DJ, songwriter, musicologist, and every Friday night from 10 till midnight, KCRW DJ, LUXXURY.
And I'm actor, writer, director, and sometimes DJ Diallo Riddle.
And this is One Song. We'll see you next time.
This episode was produced by Casey Simonson, mixing and engineering by Eric Hicks.